Hi, I'm Alan Hedblum. Welcome to our show, a place to feel like you belong. Today we welcome to the show Lillie Wolff. Lillie is the advocacy coordinator for Welcoming Michigan, a branch of the Michigan Immigrant Rights Center. Lillie, thanks for coming by to talk with us today.
Thanks, Alan.
You bet. So, Welcoming Michigan has an initiative called Receiving Communities. Tell us about that.
So, Welcoming Michigan, as you say, is a program of Michigan Immigrant Rights Center. And what we're trying to do is to reach receiving communities. And what we mean by that is the folks that were born here, U.S.-born residents of a community, people who have been here, have raised their families here, and where their community might be a destination for immigrants or newcomers from other places in the world. And so we're really trying to reach those folks to try to work together to create more welcoming communities.
So how does that work?
What that looks like is my coworker and myself, we're the two staff people for this particular program. We partner with local leaders in 4 different focus communities where we're currently working. 3 in southeast Michigan, which are Sterling Heights, Hamtramck, and Chadsey-Condon, which is in southwest Detroit, as well as on the west side of the state over here, Van Buren County, just west of Kalamazoo.
How is Van Buren County special?
Well, Van Buren is home to thousands of migrant and seasonal farm workers, and so it has a rich and long history of agricultural work, and as a result, many families from other countries, mostly Mexico, coming to work in the agricultural industry. And so while it is and always has been a destination and a welcoming place in many ways, we're working with leaders there to improve upon the atmosphere and make it even more welcoming, really lifting up the contributions of the immigrants to the communities and to the economy of Southwest Michigan.
So what are the biggest challenges faced by the immigrant populations? Thankfully there aren't a lot of hate crimes like there once were. I mean, that's a reality that was once a very common thing. There haven't been, any hate crimes in Van Buren County, for example, that we know of in the last 10 years. However, there is a lot of discrimination and there's a lot of fear. And the fear, I think, is based on maybe a scarcity mentality that, people hear in the news that immigrants are coming here to steal jobs, or they're benefiting from, public benefits, but they're not paying taxes, or there's just a lot of fear around even demographic shifts in general, whether it's based on race or class or who knows, but there's a lot of fear, and that can lead to immigrants being very isolated and not necessarily welcomed, which really hurts everybody, because what we believe is that when Michigan welcomes immigrants, Michigan thrives, and that we're really better together. Mm-hmm. That when we work together, when we exchange cultures, when we share stories, when we acknowledge that we all come from somewhere, and most of us come from ancestors who were born in other countries and who came here and settled and integrated into the culture here. That when we realize that we have the same kind of commonalities and histories and even desires and aspirations for our family, that we kind of we feel rehumanized and connected in a way that's really, I think, meaningful and worthwhile for everybody. Mm-hmm. Now, you said that you have programs in the Metro Detroit area, mm-hmm. and then in Southwest Michigan. Mm-hmm. How are those populations and programs similar, and how are they different?
Well, the metropolitan area of Detroit is obviously very big. It's a large geographic area, and there are many different communities within the Detroit area that from all over the world. For example, Hamtramck is mostly immigrants from various countries, and some that have been here for decades, and others that are newer waves, whether it's that they're refugees or other just communities that have started to settle there.
Can you give an example for our viewers?
Right.
What those communities, where they're from?
There's a growing population of Yemenis, for example, and so they're living in communities where there might be lots of longtime Polish or Ukrainian immigrants. There are, in some cases, immigrants from Syria. It depends on what's going on in the world, where refugees are coming from, obviously. Whereas there's been a long history of folks coming from Europe and Mexico and places like that. And so there's lots of different cultures represented in Detroit. Whereas I think in Van Buren County in Southwest Michigan, there certainly are folks from all over the world. but there's a very high concentration of Hispanic migrant and seasonal farm workers, again, predominantly from originally Mexico, or have, with people who have descendants or ancestors that were born in Mexico.
So how does your outreach work to the urban community versus the rural community?
Well, there's a lot of nonprofits already working on things like this in Detroit, so it's nice because we have a lot of synergy. We can kind of integrate our messaging and our vision into existing platforms that are already doing really good community building work. And I think it's a very collaborative type process in Detroit because of that, and people are kind of hungry for opportunities to collaborate and work together and share resources, especially with the economy as it is in Detroit. And I think that in Southwest Michigan, because it's more rural, there aren't as many resources as far as actual nonprofits or groups that are doing this type of work. However, we're working more in churches. There's a large faith community in West Michigan, so the faith community is really stepping up to help promote this idea of welcoming your neighbor, because obviously that's walking the walk, so to speak. And we're also really finding that it's easy to partner with schools, because obviously when you look at a school, there's ESL students from all over the world. There's a lot of compassion on the part of the teachers, especially the ESL teachers, and so those are really kind of intuitive connections for us, and we're trying to really partner with the schools to build on the connections among and within the school and with the children, and kind of bring parents into it, and then other community leaders, and so it's a slightly different model than Detroit, I would say, and it takes a little bit more time, a little bit more strategizing as far as like, how does this make sense in a rural area? How do we really leverage resources and bring people together in a meaningful way? But we're trying to just really adapt and apply the model of leadership development, public engagement, and strategic communications, which is kind of, those are the three components of our program. We're just kind of adapting and applying the model as needed in each of the communities.
When I think of migrant populations, I think that has to be a real challenge for you because of mobility. They're not always in the same place. How do you create a program if it's sort of a shifting target?
Well, that's a good point, and I think that comes back to the receiving communities component of what we're doing. So we're actually trying to reach non-immigrants, and the non-immigrants are not going anywhere. And that's why they're receiving communities, because they're the ones welcoming the newcomers, ideally.
So you're creating a base of welcome that will always be there as people come in and leave, and you probably get a lot of sort of recycling where families, if they know the local growers and have relationships, then at least they're coming back through periodically.
Yes, definitely. In fact, there are several families that we've gotten to know in the last year. For example, the Aleman family from South Haven, and they have been here for 30 years. They came here originally from Mexico to work in the agricultural industry and have settled out, and they had their family here. They birthed their 15 children, and they've all graduated high school and gone on to college and have become professionals in the community. So, they work in schools, they work in local government, they work in workforce development, economic development. So they're really contributing to the professional world here in Southwest Michigan. And I think that they are really an example of kind of the modern day migrant family. They don't necessarily have ties, but they have become receiving communities. So now they welcome other migrant and seasonal farm workers who, yes, come every year to the same farmer in a lot of cases. The farmers are a base for them to arrive. Of course, you never know with the weather what's going to happen with the crop, but we do have lots of families that do migrate, and others who just work seasonally. So they might do construction during the winter and then, pick blueberries in the summer or something like that. But the Aleman family is really inspiring because they literally open up their home to migrants to stay there if they need a place to stay before they get housing. They've started a place called the Aleman Center, which is based at Immaculate Conception Church in Hartford, Michigan. And that's a place where families can come to get food and clothing before work starts. So they're really an inspiring family.
They're really walking the talk and being those receiving, welcoming people.
Yep.
That's really awesome. So now, you attended Kalamazoo College, known for sending its students out into the world, and you found yourself in Bolivia
Ecuador.
Ecuador, sorry,
No, that's okay.
in South America. Became fluent in Spanish. You started an ESL program in the Traverse City area. And so do you think that all of these experiences were sort of grooming you for your current work, or all these forces are just aligning to have you do what you?
I think so. I think that's well put. I think that each step of the way I've realized more and more what are the best ways that I can contribute to my community and make the community where I'm working and living a more welcoming place, a more inclusive place. I think that more and more I'm realizing that I am a receiving community member, right? And I didn't have that language before, and so now I'm understanding that I don't, as a non-immigrant, I don't need to necessarily help or advocate for immigrants, although that is something that I do in other capacities and have done in the past. But that really, for me, as a non-immigrant, for me to work with other immigrants, or I'm sorry, with other non-immigrants, other receiving community members, that's almost the best way that I can help immigrants. Does that make sense? Because I can reach folks that might be a little on the fence about how they feel about immigrants, but I can talk to them and kind of meet them where they are and relate to them in a way that makes them feel safe and heard, or we can have a conversation and I can kind of be an ally and speak on behalf of immigrants with another receiving community member to try to open up a dialogue and maybe invite them to get to know some immigrants and share some time, maybe a meal, get together at an event. Really, that's the heart and soul of this work is that contact theory, that you can't, it's harder to discriminate against someone or to have stereotypes if you actually get to know them.
Have a relationship.
And so I'm realizing, I think, more and more that that is the most transformative work, and that's kind of where I find myself now after about 7 or 8 years of doing other types of advocacy and organizing and service provision.
You had mentioned earlier in the conversation today the word fear. And I think that has unfortunately gained greater prevalence in the conversation lately, and including in a lot of political conversations. How do we lessen fear in both the conversations and ultimately in how we perceive people who are not from here? Because I understand fear of the unknown, fear of people who look different, is a real human response, right? We're uncertain, so we back away. So how do we create less fear in our own lives?
One thing that we do is we share accurate information. There's obviously lots of sources of information and lots of sources of media that people are learning from, and so we want to help people learn more about the contributions of immigrants, and so we have a lot of great statistics and data on our website about the concrete, the dollar amounts. We're talking billions of dollars that the immigrant population in Michigan contributes to our economy, without which, if you already think about our economy, it's not, it's not California, it's not New York, and so I think that really is a huge, huge point for people because, again, there's a lot of scarcity mentality and a lot of people are scared of losing jobs, which is totally understandable. But the bottom line is that we really are better together, that if we can leverage the skills and resources and talents and gifts of everybody, we can be a more cohesive, safer, more successful, more vibrant community. There's obviously lots of opportunity in Detroit for that, whether it's inviting immigrants to start businesses and become, because there are so many entrepreneurial skills and gifts in the immigrant community. There's obviously high-tech, high-skilled, so to speak, immigrants from the STEM fields that are contributing to our hospitals and our every aspect of our communities. And in Van Buren County, again, the agricultural component is huge. And really, there's this argument about would Americans really want to do those jobs? And maybe, but the reality is that these families have been doing farm work for decades. They know they are professional blueberry harvesters, and that is a skill.
Absolutely.
And it's not a low skill. We like to challenge that a little bit because people talk about high skill and low skilled immigrants, and picking blueberries is not a low skill necessarily, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think exposing people to those realities and also using our communications materials.
Please.
So we use strategic communications such as this poster where we say, when Michigan welcomes immigrants, Michigan thrives. We're better together. And we have photos of our community members holding up signs saying why they care about being welcoming, what's in it for them. And it's everything from, it's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. My dad is an immigrant. I enjoy living in a multicultural society, you know. And it's like everybody has a reason, really, if you ask them, as long as they're, you know, open to the idea that when you think about it, you can think of a lot of things as far as, you know, what's important, why it matters to welcome others. And a lot of it comes back to our own histories. And so another thing that we do is we help people remember their history. Mm-hmm. A lot of times people from the US-born community don't know where their ancestors came from. And that's not a bad thing, but they might have a little bit more compassion for newcomers from other places in the world if they realize that their great-grandparents came over from Lithuania or Germany or Ireland and didn't have any, you know, really English skills or money.
Really important things to keep in mind as we look to make a welcoming community. Well, I really appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
You and Susan Reed, your director, and Christine on the east side of the state. So continued success in doing this, making Michigan a more welcoming place and a place where you feel like you belong. So thanks for joining us for this conversation. We'll be back after a short break for our segment called What'd You Say? During our conversation with Lillie Wolff, you heard the expression, be on the fence. This means unable to decide. If you picture a fence dividing two different choices, a person who doesn't know which choice to make will be straddling or sitting on the fence, looking at both options and not knowing which side to pick. You also heard Lillie say, descendants. This means the people in a family who come after you. So you are the descendants of your parents and grandparents. Your nephews and nieces are descended from your aunts and uncles. For explanations of other slang and cultural expressions, go to our website at feellikeyouBelong.com. The Onion is a newspaper and website that presents fake news as if it were true news. Its material is usually referred to as satire. That means its main job is not to inform, but to make fun of people, organizations, and society in general. The Onion has been published since 1988. There are several types of humor used in The Onion. Today, I'd like to take a look at three kinds of them. The first one is represented by this headline and image. Johnson & Johnson introduces new leave-in Q-tips. This kind of humor falls into the category of just plain silly. The humor comes because it balances a small element of truth, namely that the Johnson & Johnson company really does make a cotton swab for personal grooming. However, leaving it sticking out of one's ear looks stupid and it's potentially dangerous. Americans think this is funny because the concept and image are ridiculous, but this is presented as a serious story. For two other examples of Onion-style humor, visit the What's So Funny page of our website. In the meantime, ask your American friends if they read and like the satirical humor of The Onion. As with many world languages, English uses a playful form of repeated sounds and rhyming sounds to express certain concepts in a creative, emphatic, or fun-loving way. Linguists call this repetition reduplication. There are three kinds of reduplication I'd like to tell you about: exact repetition, rhyming, and internal substitution. An example of exact repetition is blah, 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 which means lots of talking without much meaning or content. A number of these forms can be found in children's language. For example, go pee-pee or poo-poo. And they have a kind of simple, friendly rhythm which encourages children to learn about verbal communication. Other repetitions serve to intensify the meaning in such expressions as, he's a real dum-dum. An example of rhyming is the word hubbub, which means busy or noisy activity. In rhyming, the end sound stays the same and the first part of the word changes. An example of internal substitution is topsy-turvy, which means upside down or all mixed up. The first and the last sounds stay the same, and then the parts in the middle get changed. People's names are sometimes reduplications. Here are a couple of better-known examples. John Kennedy, the boyhood name for John F. Kennedy's son. Yo-Yo Ma, who is a famous cellist. And Dee Dee Myers, the former press secretary to President Bill Clinton. If you visit the What's Up section of our website, there's a quiz with well-known English expressions of reduplication. Take the quiz and let me know how you did. That's all for today. Bye-bye.